This is the Elemental Educator, the podcast where we kindle the fires of dialogue with the alchemists of education. We're here to embark on a journey where ancient wisdom meets the contemporary world of education. On Elemental Educator, we dive into the deep waters of adaptability, feel the grounding earth of core values, ride the swift winds of change, and ignite the fiery spirit of risk-taking. Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator, and now your host, Tyler Como.
Hello and welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, and today we have two special guests ready to empower you. Georgia and Christine are co-founders of Making the Grade Project, an organization with a mission to empower educators, starting with the very beginning of their careers. They specialize in helping teachers in their home state of Massachusetts, and that's probably said with a heavy Canadian accent, by the way, so I apologize to anybody in the States hearing me pronounce that, to pass the MTEL. They support teachers everywhere in setting up their classroom and careers for success. Christine and Georgia each spent over a decade in the K-12 classroom setting before deciding it was time to make a change and support education in a different way. They've worked with hundreds of teachers over the years, through thousands of workshops, classes, and one-on-one sessions, and currently provide both individual educators and educational organizations with their support. You may know them from their podcast, Making the Grade, where they share educator stories from all over the world, each at different points of their teaching journeys. Welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast, Georgia and Christine. It is a pleasure to have you both here.
So much for having us. We're so excited to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. I want to start with my big question that I ask everybody that joins the show. How did you get to where you are right now?
Ooh, big question. You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. We're a big fan of what you're doing. And yeah, I'm just super excited to be here. And we love opening up with a big question because we ask a big question on our show as well. So resonates with us. So we both spent over a decade in the K-12 setting. And then we both just started to get into other curiosities, pursue the things that we tell our students to follow your gut. If you start getting nudges. So that the nudges ended up getting a little bit more aggressive over time for us. It was a mix of a few different things for myself. Right around the pandemic, I was having my first child and I planned a year-long leave of absence. And during that time, obviously, no one could have predicted that 2020 would shut the world down. It was a good time to pause and reflect. So that was when I got a really unique opportunity to start working with other teachers locally, virtually through a college, through some contract work. And that's where I started this pivot into supporting teachers. And then I brought Georgia along with me in the process.
Yeah, just to echo Christine, same thing. We have very parallel journeys where we were in the classroom for about the same length of time and got that nudge to try something else at around the same time. And my curiosity led me into the creative space. I always loved creating things for my students, whether it was an interactive website for them to use during COVID or just creating materials for them, helping teachers do the same. And it was great to learn about all the amazing work Christine was doing and be able to bring my creative aspect to that, help with our website and promoting what we do and creating resources for teachers. Yeah, we have similar journeys, but different strengths, and we brought them together and are so excited about what we're doing now.
And listeners, if you're curious about the website, make sure you check out the description of this episode. It is linked in there for you. Now, Georgia and Christine, how do you, a part of your work is very close to the earth element about finding those values, finding that core, the root of what people need to do. And you spoke to it about yourselves here a little bit and how you started your journey. How do you ensure when you're working with teachers that they're grounded in their core values from day one of their career, year 20 of their career? How are you working through that with them?
Good question. A big part of our work, whenever we're working with a teacher, whether it's on their MTEL or we work with new teachers as well on just setting themselves up for success in the classroom, we always start with something called learner profiles, where we're just trying to understand their unique way of learning, the things that come into play when it comes to figuring out your learning style, your background, what you've been exposed to, what you have experience with, just really getting to the root of that because we all learn differently. And if something's not being presented to you in a way that works for you to absorb it, you're not going to access it the right way. We always like to start with that and help teachers figure out what is their intrinsic strengths and work? How can they bring that into what they're doing in the classroom? And in doing, that's going to reflect on their students, right? Their students are going to see that they're able to learn in their own way because they're seeing it as an example at the head of their classroom. So that's where we start all the time, is with learner profiles. And we feel like that's such a great way for teachers to recognize that they are important and their unique traits are also important and can shine through in what they're doing every day.
Yeah.
So along that journey, what unique traits did you find that each of you have?
We found out that we have pretty similar learner profiles, which is not surprising to us. But there are 12 profiles that deal with primarily, and we narrowed those down to the 3 common ones that most educators, most teachers probably use every day and don't even think about. So are you a visual, verbal, or kinesthetic learner? And we're both mostly visual. Highly, if we had to put a percentage, I would say probably like 60-70% visual. And then we also are kinesthetic learners. So that doesn't necessarily mean just moving around. It could be like an acronym for memorizing or a system to help you organize your information. And you think of like a graphic organizer or a template, just things that help you to make order of what you're doing. So we're very similar learner profiles, which I think helps us, but also something that's really unique that has been a nice byproduct of doing this work is that teachers will then say that they take this into their classroom for their own students, because it's really gotten them to think about, oh, user experience. What are my students thinking when I'm teaching? And so best practice for all involved, which is really cool.
I love that. Now, I'm not sure about you two, but for me, starting this podcast, having all of these conversations, it's been the strongest professional development I think I've ever been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with you unpacking these learner profiles, discovering yourselves a little bit, has this taken that to another level for yourselves as well?
I think so. I think what both of us consider ourselves to be lifelong learners, like understanding that there's always going to be something new to learn. You're never going to know it all. And also you're going to evolve and you're going to change. And so at each phase of your journey, it's going to require maybe different aspects of yourself. And it's also going to maybe require you to learn new things. So I think totally agree. Starting our podcast and our business has been eye-opening, and to anyone who has done it or is thinking about doing it, you have or you will learn a lot about yourself in the process. You'll learn what you like doing, what you maybe don't like doing, but still need to learn it anyways. And so 100%, I feel that speaking for myself, I have learned a lot about myself and things that I can work on, and also just being able to hone in on things that I enjoy doing and using them in ways that I use in the classroom, but also in new ways has been really exciting. And just there's something new every day. It's always exciting.
Yeah. No, and just to echo what Georgia was just saying, we just got off a call. We're part of a coalition that is trying to move legislation along. And just to be part of that process, I can't believe this is our job, that we get to do this every day. But I think you also in whenever you do any type of self-reflection or self-exploration, whether it's work, personal, whatever the root cause of it might be, I think you also, at least for myself, I found things that I didn't realize I was uncomfortable about until we started doing this work. Before I rebuilt a podcast and we started building a brand, I would have considered myself to be a pretty confident person. Like I've spoken in front of hundreds and hundreds of students of all different ages for over a decade. And I come from a really big, loud family, and I have no problem speaking up. But I was realizing in putting myself out there that I really cared a lot about what people thought. And I don't anymore, but I did more than I had anticipated. Some like uncomfortable things to work through as well, but just all leading to personal growth, I think, ultimately. So it worked out for the best.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. There is such a piece in what you talk about in terms of even honing your skills and refining them and learning along the way and being a part of a bigger movement. And one of the biggest things that we can help people develop are executive functions. And that's heavy in the work that both of you do. I'm hoping that first you can help us define for people listening what we are referring to when we use the term executive functioning. And then how does this help in educators establishing that strong foundation for their careers?
I'll let Christine define it, because I now she has taught me so much about executive functioning, and it's a fancy term, but I think if you break it down the way that Christine will, everyone's going to realize how important it is in their everyday lives, as I have.
Yes, executive function affects everything that we do every day. How you organize and process information is the simple term to define it. And then with that, how you execute tasks in day-to-day life. So I think there are 6 areas that I learned about when I was doing my executive function training, where that has to do with organizing tasks and like chaining information, chunking information. And then from there, once you understand, I'm really strong at, for example, I'm going to use a recent life example to illustrate this idea on a grander scale. So I just got back from a few days away with 2 of my best friends from high school. And we discovered that one of them is a verbal learner, which I'm not surprised by. But we were talking about how when we were planning this trip, for example, that she did all of the logistics and in looking at like point A to point B. And she figured out from there the timing of when to pick up our friend and where a great location would be. And from there, I was like, oh, I'm going to look up all of the local spots and I'm going to plan an itinerary and make a beautiful visual schedule. And then our other friend came and she had all of these games and stuff. And we were just talking about how I was like, yeah, when I was looking at the map, I had no idea. I was like, just tell me what time to show up. We all have things that we gravitate toward. Anything that you put to the back end of your day when you're like, I don't want to do this, there's a reason for that. Like maybe it's something that you feel like you're not good at intrinsically, or maybe you have a preferred way of doing it, but it's your day-to-day tasks, how you organize information, and then how you execute tasks from there is the simplified way of it. Have you thought about, Tyler, what kind of a learner you might be based on what we've been talking about?
Oh, for sure. I'm kinesthetic and visual down. That's the way that I believe I learn. Although I would say maybe a little bit of an auditory learner too. I do learn a lot from just listening and general observations. Maybe the visual and auditory go hand in hand with each other. The one thing that I can think of from your story is next time I want to go on a trip, I think I'm going to send you an email and say, I need a plan for me, because that was some very organized trips. It sounds like a great experience with it.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
I'll share our Canva doc with you.
there we go. I would love that. Please do. Next time we go, I think we have to take our 2-3-year-old here soon to Disneyland at some point. And so we'll have to plan all the little things along the way.
Mhm.
A big moment between executive functioning, though, and your work with core values and bridging the two together to get buy-in and alignment. You create that environment where we're able to take that professional value of executive functioning and bridge it with the personal and the core values.
Do you mean in your personal life or in a classroom or either way?
Yeah, either way.
Yeah. I think for any teachers who are listening, I think executive functioning plays a huge role in your classroom, whether you've ever thought about it before or not. But having a classroom that is organized and functions in a way that your classroom's going to function the way that you bring the energy to it. So if you're coming in an organized fashion, having a plan, having how you want your day to go, letting the kids know what's expected of them, things like that, the kids are going to take that energy in and they're going to, in turn, act that way as well. And vice versa. If you're flustered all the time and not so organized, and maybe that's how you like to be, maybe you're just go with the flow. But in turn, your students are going to be like that too. So I think thinking about how you function as a person, you're such a crucial role model for those kids. So whatever your executive functioning background or skills are, thinking about how you can bring that into your classroom is going to affect day to day, how the day goes, how the kids are learning, whether or not things are feeling organized or maybe not so organized. So I think for teachers, it's something to really, especially right before the school year starts, which is the time we're at right now, it's a great time to just pause and think about what is important to you, what does make you feel structured and happy, and how can you incorporate more of that in your day-to-day at home to feel your best self, and also how can you incorporate it when you're setting up your classroom for the new school year.
So here's what's so important about that as well. If your core values are along the lines of transparency, trust, effective relationships, any kind of thing that involves that supportive system, executive functioning is going to help you optimize that system. It's going to be the framework that brings you to the next level, that makes you feel so connected and driven to everything you're doing. If you value effective relationships, teachers, start your week off with setting some goals around what does our classroom look like for expectations. That's setting an executive function. You're making a plan. That's just one of my minor little examples. I'm hoping maybe Christine or Georgia, you can share an in-depth example of what a high executing executive functioning classroom could look like.
Yeah, so we are both very intentional about everything that we do when it comes to our work and really our personal lives too. We do leave some room for like free time and things like that. But in order to be highly effective as an educator, you need to be highly intentional with your time, with your resources, with the organization of your classroom. So some things that we used to prioritize when we started the school year were working backwards, and we still do this in the work that we do now. What is the end goal? For my classroom community was like one of the most important things. I wanted every child when they came into the classroom to know that they were seen and welcome and accepted and celebrated. From the very first day, I asked them for input in forming class rules. What are things that are important to you? This is something that's important to me. The noise level is really important to me because we have some other students within the classroom who it's important to them as well. So I started giving some examples, and then I asked for their feedback, and then we all signed it together. Ending the day on a positive note, I wanted everyone to take a recap of the day and then share out what was most important to them. Sometimes it was something silly, sometimes it was something we learned, but we did what stuck with you today, and we would do a little sticky note on our chart. In terms of, we can get into instruction and stuff too, in terms of checking in with students to make sure that they are on track. We used to have a system of charting progress and reinforcing at the end of the week, and students would actually create like a literal graph and they would color it in, and it was super motivating to them. So working backwards, I think, from an end goal is like a common theme in a lot of things that we do. And just starting like before that first day, you need to have an idea of what's important to you. And then one final thought is just reflection. So like we do this in our practice monthly or so, we'll like having almost like a quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily type of system where quarterly we have to do these certain tasks, and then we ask ourselves these big questions. What do we like about what's working, what's not working? To ask my students that anonymously sometimes, and they would write on Post-it notes and things like that up on the whiteboard. But systems in place seems to be a big thing that we're coming back to.
Systems. Yeah, I taught, when I was teaching, I taught pre-K. So I taught the littlest kids. And so they're coming to me. Some of them have just turned 4 years old, right? They're still little babies. But something that was so important with those kids is not underestimating them. They're little sponges. Like they are going to soak in anything that you're showing them. And not only that, but it's their first time at school, and you're their teacher. They love you. They call you mom sometimes. So you're that example for them, and understanding that important role that you have and not taking it lightly, and recognizing that every little thing that I model, if I'm so intentional about it, they're going to in turn do it that way. They're going to see exactly what I'm doing, and they're going to want to do it the same exact way because they want to make you happy, and they want safety, and they want organization too, even if they can't put that into words. So something that I always tried to do at the beginning of a school year was just have minimal items out for them to explore with, and being very intentional with showing them how to use those items and how to put them back on the shelves and how to clean up their space, and just very quietly, calmly showing them versus speaking at them too much. And it's incredible to see how quickly they pick up on that, and they just immediately do it also, for the most part. There's some kids that need a little extra support. But yeah, so I think it comes back to the word Christine introduced, which is just being very intentional.
It's so imperative to be intentional with executive function. At a junior, senior, high level, something that I love doing is I call it my organized binder for each kid. They get a little do-a-tang, and at the start of each week, they write down what we're planning to learn for the week, what our goals are for them for the week. At the end of each day, they go back and they write 1 to 2 sentences. What did I learn? Where did it go? And on Fridays, they go back. What did I learn in the week? And on Mondays, what did I learn? And it's constant reflection, constant goal visiting. For the first week, the kids groan because they've never done it before, and it's something new to them. But after about a month in, the kids love it, and they find that they're learning and they're retaining information and better behavior in your classroom because you're addressing executive functioning problems. With that, though, not everything's perfect. You could be the most perfectly planned person and things will go wrong because you can't control everything. And that's where we start to tiptoe the difference between Earth and the core values and what we just defined as really important for people and the adversity that we're going to face along the way. So, in what ways do you, with your work, prepare new teachers to be adaptable in this ever changing educational landscape?
Yeah. Good question. It goes back to, kind of what we were speaking about at the beginning about being understanding that we all as teachers are learners and need to be open to that lifelong learning mentality of things aren't going to always go according to plan. And Christine and I are both very plan oriented people, and you can be both. You can be a plan oriented person and also embrace the attitude of I need to go with the flow a little bit also. And so I think teaching is especially a career where things are going to be changing every moment of the day. And very rarely is your lesson plan going to go according to plan. But that can actually be beautiful. I can think of a lot of lessons that I taught that went in a very different direction than I expected. And it was exactly what was needed that day. And it was amazing. So just, you can't be too rigid. You have to have a plan. You have to have an idea of your end goal, but just being open to this might not play out exactly as as I think it's going to, but it's going to end up exactly how it needs to be. It's either going to end up better or it's going to give me information on what I can change for next time, because we don't always write the most perfect lesson plans. It could be that it just wasn't really getting their attention, and what can we do better next time? Just embracing that, yes, you're the teacher, but these kids are going to teach you something every day about your practice and what you can do better and change.
Yeah, Georgia mentioned when we first started working in a different space, things will turn out the way they're supposed to or better, and being open to the opportunity and just the idea that all that we're doing and all that we're planning, we might have this outcome that we have no idea what's yet to come. And thinking about your question too, from like the teacher lens of being in a classroom and having new ideas thrown at you all the time or new curriculum, you are the expert in your classroom. Like, it's not, this is my house or get out. But at the same time, we are students better than any curriculum development professional who's coming into your classroom, any administrator. You are with those students 6 hours a day, 180 days out of the year. So it's okay for you to implement something and then say no politely. And you can be a polite rebel if you need to be. I can think of many times where I've had to advocate for my students on behalf of administrators, even sometimes with parents, very politely. This is what I'm seeing in the classroom, and is it their best interest from what they voiced to me, and always advocating for your students' needs at the heart of what you do, even if it's hard.
Absolutely, because we're there to do what's best for those kids. Now, a very specific example here with adversity would be challenges of neurodiverse learners. So the different types of learners that we have in classrooms. You talked about the most popular 3 that we might have with a list of up to 10. Well, in a classroom, upwards 30 to 40 kids, that's a lot of different ways that people are learning and a lot of different groups to unpack and levels that these kids are at. How do we address this challenge of neurodiversity in the classroom?
Great. One of my favorite questions, because my background is special education, and this is the heart and soul of what we do. There are so many ways that you can implement little tweaks to your practice. It doesn't need to be an overhaul of anything that you're doing. But I would say before you even get into the classroom with your students, looking up any type of learner plan. In the United States, we have individualized education plans, 504s, just a legal document of accommodations, just getting familiar with it. They can be long and intimidating, but really the part that it's most important for your classroom is going to be that accommodation page. It should only take 5 minutes of your time. So that's a start. Talking to students openly and checking in with them based on the level of student that you had. With Georgia, it's easier, maybe on the way in and out of, not easier, but on the way in and out of the classroom, you could probably see the look on their faces. I'm thinking of my 4-year-old at home. They might be a little more open. It's all over their face. But with my college students, I would have them share anonymously what's working, what would you want more of, what do you want less of? Very simple. And so they would just tell me, they would come up and be like, Professor Zubo, we love this. We want to do this. Or like, every time I open this website, I want to die. Thanks for the feedback. But just what is working, what's not. And then being flexible, we were talking about, you are going to have to shift what you're doing. When you start doing something, you're going to assess the classroom and quickly figure out this is working or it's not working. So just knowing that you're going to have to change as you go. And then we can't say enough about multimodal instruction. I know that's like a big buzzword, and that's something that was probably like shoved at you when you were in your educator prep program, but it does work. Like preferential seating, even just thinking about what kind of examples can you give ahead of time? How long is your lesson? We refuse to do anything above really an hour and 45 minutes tops, and we still give like a 45-minute break at the break mark. We can't sit that long. We just had a 45-minute meeting, and I was like crawling on my skin.
I know.
Just being really mindful of, all the pieces of instruction. If you were sitting in that classroom, are you going to be engaged?
Mhm.
Are you going to be excited about what you're learning? Maybe not every day, but that's the goal, right? And then just little things sorry, I could go on about this. Points of access.
No, that's great.
Yeah, points of access, I think, is a big one. So if you're like, I think of when I was working with gen ed teachers as a special ed teacher, they're overwhelmed with the content. So what are the Reader's Digest version of what all of the students need to know for X, Y, Z? And that's going to be the most, maybe not every single piece is the most important. Maybe not everyone needs to do 20 math problems, but these 5 are the most important for them. So short story long.
And with that, though, adversity sends a powerful message. It's one of the strongest forms of communication. If you have adversity as a leader, as a teacher, wherever organization you might be in, there's a message being sent, and there's a reason adversity is there. And you mentioned it yourself, the youngest kids send the most honest messages. If you are doing something not fun and not targeted to their learner profile, you're going to see it in behavior. You're going to see it in their actions. You're going to face adversity. You're going to struggle in your classroom. That's your wake-up call to look at what you're doing, go back to your core, and see what you need to realign with. Now, as you become adults, it's a little different. They might say something like, this website makes me want to kill myself. Now, that is them expressing, though, their adversity, their issue. They have a struggle. It's not meeting their learner profile. And so how can we look at that? Not take it personally, but be the expert and say, I'm not meeting their learner profile. I need to adjust it. And we need to start talking about what change and what actionable items are we putting forward. And that's where we play with the difference between the air element of facing the adversity and our water element of implementing change. How do you support teachers in implementing these changes in their classroom in what seems to be a seamless way?
I think the first step you just mentioned is recognizing, okay, there's behaviors happening, there's adversity, like something's wrong. So pausing to recognize that is the first step. It's huge because some people will just push through that and be like, oh, I just have this group of kids that they don't want to learn. They're always fighting me. They're the worst. And so whether they're in pre-K or high school, their behavior is speaking something. There's a meaning behind that. Pausing and recognizing that there's a problem. And then also I always encourage, especially the early childhood teachers to do this. And I would probably encourage older grades to do it as well. I just don't have experience in those grades, but observations, taking a break from whatever you have planned that day that's not working and just giving more of a free period of time. I would do this all the time with my pre-K kids. If I felt like we were just stuck and we needed to change the energy, I would be, again, intentional. I would put out 4 different areas of activities that I knew had meaning and they were going to get something from it, and just see where they're gravitating towards. And if that's going to give you information, if they're gravitating towards the activity where it's like more of an alone activity where they're working quietly, or if they're gravitating towards the activity where it's a group activity where they're creating something together, that's going to give you information about what that particular child is interested in and how they learn. And so taking that time to just take a step back and observe, take notes, whatever you need to do, is going to just give you some really important feedback of what can I change? Oh my gosh, Johnny is never listening to me, but I just realized he sat and read a book for 45 minutes. I didn't even know he liked to read. It's just going to give you information. There's so much power in observing your kids and also in observing other teachers. If you're feeling stuck and you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, most principles will allow you to take some time to go observe another teacher for a few minutes that is, having maybe an easier time, or just a teacher that you get along with and want to learn from. So I think there's so much power in just taking a step back to learn new information and take that in to help you determine what you need to adjust to be better.
And Christine said it earlier, to do it with intention. And your message here about if we want to implement something effectively, we need to be able to read the room and see how it's being responded to as well. You need to check in with intention. And if you're just waiting to see the response, there's a high likelihood that you're also going to take that response personally, and it's going to bring you down a bit more, and you're going to start to get frustrated with it. But with intention, if you're seeking the feedback, how is this going for you? How can we optimize it? What can it look like to be a bit better? Now you're bringing in that level of change that makes them feel a part of the change process and not somebody that it's just being imposed on. Now, to shift a little bit though, you also share a concept called slow productivity. Can you explain how slow productivity helps teachers manage their workload effectively while also maintaining that high quality teaching?
Yeah, we just found out about this term. So it might be new to some people, but I think once we talk about it a little bit more, like executive functioning, you're going to realize, oh, I understand that concept. I just never thought about it with those two words. So we learned about this from a colleague. We actually had her on our podcast. So if anyone is very interested in slow productivity, we recommend listening to her episode. Dr. Kate Henry, she's an expert in this field. She's a productivity coach. And so she has taught us all about it. And essentially, slow productivity is just thinking about how we're always adding things into our life, right? Especially as teachers, we have all our responsibilities at home and all of our responsibilities in the classroom, filling up our calendars with Zoom meetings and whatever it might be. And we're not so much thinking about being intentional, like we keep coming back to this word, intentional about time blocking time for ourselves that is really meant to just sit back and take a breather. We're not as focused on making time for that because there's so much that needs to get done all the time. And so slow productivity is really about, if you slow down a little bit, you're going to be even more productive in the long run. And so small examples of incorporating slow productivity into your life can simply be, Christine has said, after this time in the night, I am not checking my email. I know that more emails are coming in and there's more things that I could do for the next day to get ahead, but I'm not doing it. That is my time to decompress. Something that I've tried to incorporate more is when I'm exercising, whether I'm on a walk or at the gym or whatever it is, I will not check my phone. I'm not going to check my social media. I'm not going to check my email. That is just time for me. And so productivity is simply ways of setting goals like that. Small goals. It doesn't have to be every day I'm going to go on an hour-long walk. It's just small things that can really add up to just benefit your well-being, which in turn is going to come across in your teaching if you're taking the time to take care of yourself in that way.
I love that. And I am so bad at checking my phone and emails at all hours. Something I need to put my phone in an entirely different room to be there for myself and create time for myself. That message is so powerful to make sure that you take time for yourself. And the message slowing down does not mean necessarily do those tasks slower, but it's actually the message of sometimes less is more.
Exactly. And creating intentional space in your day, even if it's like, oh, this 10-minute drive to and from pick up or drop off, I'm not going to talk to anyone. And then checking in with yourself says, do I want to listen to a podcast? Do I want quiet? Do I want to call someone? And just seeing how you actually feel in that moment, because it's an intentional way to check in with yourself too, which is, I think, we are pretty good about time blocking our day and not doing too many things in one pocket. But I think that we could all use help with checking in with, wait, how am I actually feeling today? Do I really want to go do this workout or do I want to read my book? We'll see when I get there.
And the message behind that, we're spoiling an episode that's going to come out a little bit after this one. The idea behind time blocking and that meeting with yourself. And once you create a time block for yourself, you are committed to that. Now, you can move around where it needs to happen, but by putting it in a time block, you are saying, this is going to happen. I'm going to make sure I do it. Things happen where they have to shift around every now and then, but you're committing it. You're not deleting it. It's staying there. And if you have to just shift it to a different time, go ahead and shift it. I need to commit to time blocking myself back to a few other things in my life as well to get myself going again. It's such a powerful movement, and it is one of the top pieces of executive functioning is if you are a strong time blocker, you have strong executive functioning. Now, this is the fun part because we get to play with a little bit of fire. We shift from water of implementing change to recognizing that sometimes these changes are scary, sometimes these changes are overwhelming, and they become a bit of a risk. So what advice would you give to new teachers who are hesitant to take that risk and ignite a spark in that teaching method that is going to optimize what they're doing, but they're a little fearful?
It's a good question. So I'm a bad person to ask because I'm an Aries and I'm a fire sign. So I'm like, just do it.
I love that.
I think coming back to the idea of that you are the expert of your classrooms. This is my house mentality of I know these students, I know the environment of this classroom. So coming back to that idea and that mindset that you are the expert, and something that Georgia does a really great job of in reminding me of, I think, is like incremental changes. It doesn't need to be this huge thing at once. And it doesn't need to be slowly rolling something out. Even when we first started talking about a podcast idea, it was so exciting and we had so many things going on in the back end. We were like, okay, we don't need to record every episode, or, right now we don't need to know every single person we're going to have on this season, but maybe we'll, take one time a week where we'll intentionally have a conversation and check in about like how we're feeling about when we start or something like that. And so it doesn't need to be all at once. It can be slowly burning, coming back to that fire analogy. And in the back end, just reminding yourself of the fire within you and then baby steps.
Small steps. And change is scary for everyone. I have some big, exciting changes coming in my life soon, but I'm also terrified of them, even though they're good things. And that's normal. I think it's human nature to just, even if something's not working, you get comfortable and like it. You're like, it's not working, but it's okay. I know it. I understand it. We do that in relationships. We do that in so many avenues of our life. So recognizing that's okay, but being open and that it can be a small thing. It can be things we've talked about on this call. Just, I know something needs to change. So on Friday, I'm going to see if I can observe my co-teacher for a little bit. It's just something small. That doesn't mean that the next day you're going to do everything the same way as the co-teacher. It just means you took a little step in the right direction. So I think if you're afraid of change or resistant to it, try something small and a step in the right direction, and you'll end up where you need to be eventually.
And that's an emerging theme on everybody that I talk to about risk-taking and playing with fire is starting small. I think, Christine, you alluded to this again in metaphor, which I love. You said, I'm in Aries, which is a fire sign, so I'm just going to go for it. You brought it back to your earth, your core value, and you said, this is a part of what I am and who I believe in, and that's why I'm doing it. And if you can create that connection back to yourself, where a lot of times with teachers, we need to root it back to what we truly believe is what's best for kids. And that's why we're going to try something different. You need to do things that you like doing and excite you. And if something doesn't excite you, stop doing it. It's time to switch it up. What are some of the ways that these teachers can actually start igniting their students' passions for learning, particularly in these diverse and inclusive classroom environments?
In the younger grades, I will say, and I'm maybe biased, I think it's a little bit easier in the younger grades to be able to let the kids take the lead with the learning a bit more, because in pre-K, especially in pre-K, the teacher is the owner of the curriculum. You get to decide what direction to go with it. You do have certain standards you need to follow, but for the most part, you get to be very creative, which was my favorite part about teaching pre-K. And even in kindergarten, it gets to be more and more. You have to follow this curriculum at this time. And I don't have experience with older grades, but I know that the pressures those teachers feel are even stronger of, oh my gosh, I have to get through this. And just how could I ever have time for letting the kids explore their interests? But I think as much as you can incorporate a project-based approach, that was my founding belief in my pre-K classroom, was just figuring out what the kids are excited about by just observing them. Again, going back to that, what are they talking about? What are they doing? What are they gravitating towards? And trying to build the curriculum around that. Again, a little bit easier with the younger kids. If they're all talking about trains and you can tell they're excited about it, they're the way to do math with trains and do writing with trains and social curriculum with trains. You can do that. And I know that in the older grades, there's maybe less flexibility around that, but I think as much as you can, show the kids that you hear them and you see what they're excited about, and making time for those conversations and incorporating those interests as much as you possibly can into assignments and just in the day-to-day conversations you're having with them, making them feel seen as a person, not just as a student, that you care about what they're doing outside of school and their families and their cultures, because everyone's bringing something unique to the table, and showing them that matters to you as their teacher. They're going to take that with them for life, that you care about, that you don't just care about, did you do your math homework, but what was it like at home last night? So as much as you can incorporate their unique learning styles, their unique interests, their unique backgrounds, that's going to go a long way. I don't even remember what your question was. I went off on a tangent, but I hope that answers it.
That was a great answer. And all I can think about in that as well is there are, where I'm from, there are legal obligations that teachers have to build effective relationships. And what you're explaining is the definition of how we build effective relationships. There's a different, it doesn't say positive relationships, it says effective. And showing genuine care, genuine interest in what people are doing, that's step one to building that effective relationship, because you start to get into compassion, you start to build trust, you start to build the foundations of your relationship to create alignment and move forward together. Now, earlier we had said once we get to about that 45-minute mark, we get antsy, we need to stretch. I'm going to challenge both of you with a question here because we're at the 46-minute mark here. We'll go Christine and then Georgia here. And the reason I say it's a challenge is I know you're going to want to give the same answer, and I need a different answer from both of you. What are you hoping that people action in their lives tomorrow from the message you're bringing today?
We need a different answer from each of us.
Yeah, you bet.
Sorry.
I'm going to go first.
You can
I don't know.
Go first. I don't know. I know. I want to put thought into this. I almost feel like it's a trick question the way that you said it. Hold on. Thinking about
No trick.
Sorry, can you repeat it? An actionable.
What are you hoping that people listening right now will action in their lives tomorrow from the message that you're sending?
Okay. In order to be an effective educator and do all of the things that we're talking about, you need to take care of yourself first. So start with a slow productivity movement, whether it's like just figuring out a little bit of time in your days that you can start doing something. And it might even sound so silly as my second child. I remember I lost myself a little bit in postpartum, and I was like, okay, I have time to myself. What do I even like to do anymore? And I made a list in my phone because I was so sleep deprived and exhausted that by the time I got to a free pocket of time, I was like, what do I do? Just identifying what that time could be. And even if you're so tired that you need to write down a few things to remind yourself of what you like to do, I would say start there, taking care of yourself first.
It's a good one. I guess I'll relate mine more to the classroom just to be different than Christine. So I'll say, I guess when this episode releases, teachers will be about to start their new school year or probably already started it actually. And so I would say just doing a few extra things that maybe you think you don't have time for because you want to squeeze in that first math lesson or whatever it is. But what can you incorporate this week of school that's just a fun activity to get to know your kids a little bit better? What can you do today? Make time for it, whatever it is, whether it's even sharing something about yourself that you're comfortable sharing with your kids. How can you make time for those conversations a little bit more? Because I think just doing that at the very beginning of the school year and really forming those relationships early on just really sets the tone for the entire year. And so if they're all first day of school seeing you as someone that they can come to talk to, you're more than just their teacher, you're a person that wants to share yourself with them and vice versa. I think that's just going to set the tone for a really great school year.
And alchemists, this message that they're sharing, it is so easy to start this. If you think about one way that you can get to know the people that you work with, the kids you teach a little bit better, you can think of a 5-minute activity. Start that now. If you're driving to work listening to this, start your day with it. If you're coming home at the end of the day, start tomorrow with it. And our message about taking care of yourself, you can do something right in this moment to do that. Maybe you need to shut this podcast off. Maybe you need to put your phone away. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Come back to it later. That would be great. But that being said, you can action that right now. So 2 very powerful messages. I have to ask, what does your future look like, Georgia and Christine?
Good question. We are collectively, we do a lot together. We're hoping to continue our podcast. We only release them once a month now, but we love it. We're just meeting teachers all over the world, really. And so we hope to continue that because we've seen how powerful it is to give teachers a space to share their stories, as do you. So thank you for doing that as well. So we'll continue the Making the Grade podcast. And as for our work with Making the Grade project, we don't see that stopping anytime soon either. We just hope to grow it as much as we can. We mostly work with teachers in Massachusetts, helping them to pass their teacher exams and just get set up on the right foot with their first year in the classroom. That being said, we would love to branch out and work with teachers all over the country, maybe even in Canada, who knows? And just our vision is just a beautiful workforce of teachers who are taking care of themselves and love what they do. And if not, then they're shifting to something else. We just want everyone to be happy.
Yeah. Making a difference in the education space for sure. And that kind of just evolves as needs evolve in our passion and pursuit of it. It evolves the more that we learn. But yeah, definitely staying in the education space to help teachers and students everywhere.
Thank you so much for sharing. And would welcome you very much. Very beautiful places to visit as well. I'm sure if you sat down with your group of friends, this could be planned in a very mindful trip that you're able to schedule all the way to here. Anybody that's listening, if they want to learn more, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find us on Instagram. We're very active on there if you want to shoot us a message. We have 2 Instagrams, Making the Grade Pod for our podcast and Making the Grade Project, which is more teacher support based. Either one, you can find us on there. Our website, makingthegradeproject.com. All of everything we do is on there. You can also find a link to our podcast. We'd love for you to listen. And if you want to be on our show, we'd love to have you there as well. We have a little form you can fill out. You'll see that on Instagram too. And we'd welcome that as well.
Alchemists, I'm your host, Tyler. This is the Elemental Educator podcast. And on behalf of everybody that gets to be a part of this journey, Georgia and Christine, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to sit down with me and have a very powerful conversation around how these elements have impacted what drives you.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
Thank you for the space, Tyler.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. Our aim is to illuminate optimal educational practices on a global scale. And second, we want to shine a light on the expertise and knowledge that Tyler brings to educational institutions. He's not just a talking head. He's a practicing educator, a school principal, armed with a master's in educational administration, and on the brink of completing his doctorate. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator. And to contact us, fire off an email. See what I did there? Fire off. Okay. Send an email to elementaleducator@gmail.com. See you next time on the Elemental Educator.